Hey everybody, welcome back to Modern Day Musician. I'm John Tuohy, and I'm here with my friend Steve Gregory, guitarist, singer, songwriter extraordinaire. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, just to let the audience know, is that we're going to, since we're both guitar players, we'll probably have a bunch of guitar content. We'll also talk a lot about sort of the practical aspects of being a musician now, like I do in my other conversations. But Steve has some unique insight because he does a lot of weddings, top 40 stuff for income. And we both do a fair amount of that. So it's kind of cool. I think we could talk about sort of how that process works. But first, navigating the wedding and party band circuit for cash, essentially.
One aspect. I mean, I think there's two worlds that collide here, that overlap, but that whole scene, the function band, working musician thing, is different than the original music thing. It's a completely different scene, and you go about it completely differently. Audience, the audience.
Okay. Let's start here. This is a good place to start. So yes. So what is different for you? How do you sort of conceptualize those two things? I mean, I have Mile Marker Zero and Zero Sync as sort of my creative projects. I have those guys, which is the wedding band function thing. How do you conceptualize your projects
they're not
that way?
different.
Different,
I guess, in the aspect that once you're playing music, right? So if you can find joy in playing music, it's the same thing. There's a lot to unravel here. So I don't know where I should start, but okay. So you've played with me when I've been doing my music, and from an artist standpoint, what's different for me viscerally is being able to find the joy while I'm on stage. So when I'm playing my music, I'm so concerned about how does it sound, who's playing the right notes, the wrong things, what's going right. I'm not focused on my guitar playing and my singing. And I actually don't enjoy it as much. So when I'm playing with another professional group, I can just sort of relax as a sideman and focus on doing my thing really well so that everybody else can do their thing really well. And I can react to what they're doing in real time. Do you know what I mean? So if 80% of it is perfect, that 20% that isn't, I can react to it. Whereas when it's my music, if it doesn't sound like the recording that I made perfectly, well, there's something emotional that I can't get to. So the whole original thing for me never really took off because I'm really better in terms of being a musician as a side. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear someone else play my music. I never wanted to be the fan. So I work really well as a side. So how they're really different, the audience, I think, is different. So my client in that party band world is either the band leader or the bride and groom or the band. And those are terms that you really don't use in original music. Right? Who's your audience in original music? Well, 5 people in Sri Lanka, 10 people in Seattle. You know what I mean? It's a business when you're doing that. It's a business.
Well, it's interesting. Okay, so I want to pick up on something you said because that's interesting to me. Because I met you playing original music first before. I mean, I knew you did covers and stuff, but you were you're an original artist. You had a couple different groups that you had done that with. So what made you realize that you say your strength is in actually being a
I
side
always knew
man?
that.
Was there any particular moment?
From the moment I started playing, throughout Berkeley, I did the Berkeley thing. I know you did the Westcott thing, right? I was sort of like trained to be a side person, and I got really comfortable in, knowing when to shut up, when to speak, when not to speak. Like the whole Tim Pierce thing, he's like the master. But I got comfortable doing that and providing that service as a guitar artist for the artist. And, but then, what's interesting is then actually doing it myself, has informed, they both inform each other, right? So being an artist, knowing what I need from people, then taught me how to be a better side and vice versa. So after doing this for decades, doing both for so long, I'm more comfortable with both now. But in the past, like when, we've done my music together, I was never really comfortable. But yeah, and I haven't performed my music live in a couple of years. I think the last show I did was at Main Street Tavern in Manchester with a band that I threw together with great musicians, but it's always thrown together, which is the other problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back like maybe 3 years ago. And I had some songs on. I won't say the name of the station because I don't want to get in trouble. We should talk about it a bit. I won't name names. I won't say the station, but I had a couple songs being played prime time for like a year and a half. They weren't in the system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because the DJs were skirting around the owner of the radio station. It's a major station, which will go unnamed.
Oh, okay.
And because of that, we were trying to build some traction. This is an aside, by the way, because I'm going off on a tangent, but it's a really cool story. A few of my friends that work at this station said, listen, the owner told us that he wants us to like pull a prank, quote unquote. Well, the prank that we're going to pull is we're going to launch an artist from, like radio stations used to do. So let's come up with some ridiculous backstory of Jackson Gold and the Definitions, because that's my pseudonym. And let's play the music. And people were calling in, like, what is this? What is this? And some of my students knew, and they would see stuff on the message boards of their towns like, hey, Mr. P, take a look. They played your song, and these people are like talking, like, who is this? Can someone tell us who this is? And so nobody knew who it was. The credits wouldn't come up, and when they call into the station they wouldn't say anything. They'd be like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And so there were a bunch of people in towns in our area that were just on their town message boards, like, the station played this song again. I love it. My wife loves it. What is it? And no one could figure it out. And so I got like a $500,000 worth of payola, but none of the promo because nobody knew who it was. We actually played the gig with the station sort of backing it lightly. I think 50 people showed up. But I just realized, like, why? Like, what's the point? So, I decided to just record and just have fun with the process. I just really enjoy the process of recording and mixing. A lot of the reason why I write is because I'm fascinated with the lyric writing process and the mixing process. And I asked people if I could mix their music, and they just kept saying no. So I had to write my own mix. So that's part of it too. So, but anyway, fun little story about my time on FM radio.
I like it. Man, that's a really crazy story, but that must have been very interesting for people to be like, wow, I love this. When is the who is this? I've never heard. And then it's kind of the whole process.
It's wild to turn on.
Must have been kind of
like a major station prime time, like drive time, and hear your song. And it's like proof of concept. People were calling in and they really dug. And the whole idea was, well, I get it. To make money, you have to only play the songs that have charted already, but it's a catch-22. And we want to prove that if you just put good music in front of an audience, they're going to like it. I don't know if I agree with that completely, but it was working technically. So I don't know.
Ah, man, that's interesting. Okay. So obviously, that's a kind of an interesting highlight, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely a highlight. I mean, I did a lot of other things too, like another really good highlight. I mean, this goes back years. I mean, I graduated college in 2004. So I remember we opened up for Lifehouse, which was like a pretty big show, thousands of people, and other national artists as well. Under my name, and then I joined another band, Article 19, for a little bit, and some other bands. But at the end of it, it's like, well, unless you want to eat a piece of bread every day, and that's your diet, one piece of bread a day in a van with 6 other people. I know you've done something similar, but I have a kid. I have a day job. I'm an adult. I didn't do that when I was younger, and I'm not about to do that now. So like, there's really no point unless you're going to get big on a TikTok, and I don't have the face for TikTok. So,
you might have the face for the
what's
Korean
called?
knockoff of TikTok that's coming. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so this is good because this is talking about, we'll talk about more of the commercial side of
Well,
things.
is there a commercial side right now? I mean, we both know Brett. He's got music and TV shows and I think commercials too. So I mean, there's that avenue. There are, yeah.
Yep. Brett Sandler.
So I mean, there's ways to make money writing music. But I mean, personally, I've just decided that I love playing, so I'm going to make money by playing in function bands and teaching, which, I teach in public schools. I did the whole, music teacher in public school.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I love hearing other perspectives because if you said to me, I mean, I like doing all the things I do. I do a lot of musical things, but if you said you could only do one thing, John, like let's divorce it from reality for a moment, it would absolutely be writing original music. No, if we start from that, my original music, either Mile Marker Zero or Zero Sync or my solo stuff that I slowly churn on that I've never put out yet, but like. That's, I mean, 1,000%. And it's not the recording for me. It's always the writing. It's never the mixing. I do it because I have to.
I don't know. It's been mixing.
I know there's people better than me. And so thank you. That's Jake. That's Jocko who's doing all that. Yeah. He's amazing. And so I wouldn't, I let him do that stuff. Although when I make demos, another thing we could talk about is that they're so insanely detailed that if his mix doesn't sound like my demo, could you move the guitar up a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pretty picky when it comes to stuff like that. If it sounds better than what I put, I'm down. I feel I'm totally fine with that. But anyway, so that's interesting. Like if you were to, so now if we put, financial, what's the next musical thing that I do that provides some money? What would be the thing that I would choose? It would probably be doing theater, which I've been doing a lot of because the musicians are great. Everyone is nasty. Everyone shows up on time and prepared. The shows, if it's a good show, goes over great. People enjoy it. The audience enjoys it. You enjoy playing something. There's less creativity because you're trying to realize the score of someone else, but there's more. There's
that's
just
exactly why I play
gets done, and I love that
because if you're with the right group, like I play with an agency group, and they're all some of the best players from New York, right? And it's the same thing. So you walk away feeling like musically, I like walking away from a gig feeling like I need to practice, and I often do because these are cats that have played with I was on the road with Eliza Minnelli for 10 years, and I played with Frank Sinatra, like. Crazy stuff. I mean, these are heavy cats, and I'm sure I don't do cut time, man. It's a little too fast for me. Because they do two. But same reasons, and it's good money.
Yeah, and it's good money. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's really it's there's some interesting parallels, and the choice must have been to be like I'm not focusing on my own music except for maybe sort of for fun to write when I feel like it, as opposed to I have to write a song now. That must have been an interesting choice for you.
It's funny.
Did that make you
when you were doing the whole radio thing again? It lasted for about a year and a half. I hadn't written in a few years, but it was fun because there was a point person. Who would basically almost act like a record company. And I would record and produce these songs and pitch it to him. And he would say, no, that's not the one. No, that's not the one. It needs more of this, needs more of this, needs more of that. And through that process, I decided I'm going to trust him. I followed that direction, and I ended up with some songs that really hit the mark. Like, wow, he was totally right. Those 3-minute concise songs that do X, Y, Z, they work for a reason. And so that made me want to record and write more because I was interested to see, well, what really is effective. But, after that process, I haven't really written because it's like, well, to me, there needs to be some utility. There needs to be enough utility for me to keep going. And right now, if I look at my Spotify listeners, I mean, listen, I don't write crap. It's not.
Yeah, no, not at all.
If I look at my Spotify listenership, I had like 10 listeners this month. It's like, so what's the utility? Because the market is saturated with so much good music. Like, who knows where to turn? So it comes down to marketing. Who has the best, I'll say, TikTok videos to funnel people to different places. And man, I don't have time for that. Right? I wake up at 4:00 every morning. I'm in grad school. I don't have time for that. So what do I want to do? Yeah, I want to do my original music. But at the same time, I'm going to take my number 2, which for you would be theater. For me is weddings, for those reasons. And I want to focus on my day job and getting my graduate degree and raising a kid. That's what I want to do. Everything else started like a peg.
So, well, a lot of that seems like really practical decisions, which I love. I'm sort of obsessed with like the practical decisions, like funneling things down because, I had my first kid 3 months ago. And so now decisions, but I have to, speaking of making those practical decisions, they have started already coming down the line. And it's like, okay, I normally would take this particular gig, or it's like, I can't, it's $100. I can't, I'm not leaving the house for that to go do, whereas before I'd be like, oh, I got nothing on the calendar. I guess I'll go do it. So a lot of these things I feel like end up sort of becoming practical. And of course, there's the financial aspect too. Although I have perennially never been driven by money. I've always wanted to have enough money to pay the bills and not be in debt and not be broke and all that stuff. But that's never been my primary goal. And it's also never been my primary goal to be big, if that makes any sense. That was never, I do music for me first. And that's why I write the stuff. And so, a good example would be Mile Marker Zero. I've been in this band forever, over almost 2 decades at this point, which is crazy.
And by the way, I know I've said this before, but you guys are still one of the best sounding live bands I've heard in this area. And not just the area. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into the sound design behind what you guys do, clearly. Even translates. It's
thank you
on how people react.
Thank you
on having their first kid, man, because I took a different approach. I was like, listen, somebody's got to bring in extra cash. So I said yes to it. And then
so you said
I decided, like, hey,
right.
Well, PDA party band, that whole thing. My handle on Instagram still. There's no PDA party band anymore. It's just kind of like me doing my own thing. But I was like, well, these agency bands are making money hand over fist. Some of them are making $500,000 a year gross, course, but still. Well, let me just bust my hump for the next 3 to 4 years and maybe get to a point where I can have multiple lineups out at once and find a way not to automate. You can't automate music. And, you can't automate performance, but at least be able to clean up on some gigs that I'm not physically at. And so I went real hard, and especially COVID, with the promotions and doing live streams and everything. But I spent so much time and energy trying to do that, essentially for my family, because I was like, listen, you want XYZ, we only have, so much. Let me do this now, and hopefully in 5 years it'll pay off. But it's the best chance I got right now to do something more. And that just imploded. I was working. I wasn't sleeping. I was pushing. I was getting the DMX with the lights and all that, which was, hindsight overkill. But I really, really pushed myself to do something that could sell. And it did. It did really well when it was happening. But it was unsustainable. yeah, that level of drive
It's too much.
And energy is just unsustainable. So anyway, yeah, I really just enjoy now just being able to say, yeah, I've got a gig this Saturday. If anything goes wrong, it's not my responsibility. What my responsibility is showing up
Mm-hmm.
and playing the parts well and singing the parts, being a good hang, being somebody that people want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe if I can throw in the coolest new Jack Pearson lick that I learned or Jimmy Herring lick that I learned, it's great. But if not, it's not the end of the world or anything. And if the bride's upset, it's no longer my problem.
Yes. Well, I mean, there is the hazard. There's, I consider it
Oh,
hazard pay when the leader of the band makes a little more money because there's a lot of hazards, and it's like, I know there's some guys who really sort of resent that. I do not at all because I've seen what goes into that, man. And it's like, you are the planning and the meetings and the making sure everything's right day of, and you have to, herd cats such as the musicians and it's like,
it's not even that. It's not even that.
It really is. It could be.
It's capitalism. And like, I don't know where this idea came from that everyone gets equal pay just because you're on the bandstand. You didn't start the brand. You're not the face of it. You're a side.
Yeah.
And I never want to hear if someone comes up, usually like we're eating and maybe somebody from the side of the family comes over and says, "Oh, you guys are great. How much does the band cost?" Oop, you got to talk to him. How much? Hey, how much you making tonight? Don't ever ask someone how much they're making or say how much you're making. It's not my business what the bass player decided to negotiate with the band. I know what I get and what's fair for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I never. And I've had that conversation with band leaders before where they would apologize and say, "Well, I'm taking a little more." I'm like, don't tell me. I don't want to know. You don't tell me anything. No, this is your business.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, this kind of just is like a law. It's almost like a law of thermodynamics. It's like the more risk you take, the more, if it's on, then you get more of the reward. I don't really see much of an issue. Now, look, you're paying some poor guy $150, and you're paying who's doing the same amount of work as someone getting paid $900. Okay, maybe you need to figure out a little bit more.
But also, as a musician, you have to know what's fair for you.
But yes, you also have to accept
and
what is a good rate.
I'm weary about working with new people unless they come. I don't want to say recommended, but if a new band leader hits me up, if I don't know who they are, I got to find out who works with them. I'm going to call them. I'm going to message them. Hey, what's it like?
Yeah.
Who are these people? Sure. What's going on? Because I've been burnt too. So
yeah. I think we all have stories where like we've taken a gig that we probably in hindsight it's like that was way more way more fuss, way more trouble, way more everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And is there anything in particular if you work with a new band leader that you ask them about that's important?
No, I laugh because
contract
if
always
you bring
a contract
that up
for
to
you.
anybody, they balk and say, "No, I'm out," because it's not standard for people in our business to use contracts. I joke. I don't give a contract, but if something goes wrong and you just know who not to call back and who not to take phone calls from it. So there have been people that I've, on the other side of things where I've hired and they know exactly what the deal is. You know me, I get the set lists out with enough time in advance, prep material and things where you should be on point. And there's been once or twice where people show up not knowing the songs at all. I'll get through the night any way I can. Yes. I'll pay them what I agreed to pay them. I don't dock pay. I'm never calling you again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Well, I'll tell you, man, that's the thing I found in the theater world, the professional theater world. It's like you show up one day and things aren't right.
Yep.
There's another 10 people waiting by the phone to pick up and come play the gig, probably better than you. So you you don't deal with that at all, which is one of the other things that I love about it. That's rare. And rare does that ever happen.
If I were to give one piece of advice, because we were talking about this before the camera started rolling, if I was going to give one piece of advice for younger musicians, I would say, in terms of your skill set, get your ducks in order now while you're young as possible before you have all the things that come along with adulting, especially a kid, especially relationship, right?
Yeah.
So put your 8 hours a day in now. I mean, there was a crazy interview that I saw of Joe Bonamassa when he was like 11. And the guy was talking like he was, in his 20s back then. And the interviewer asked him, like, how are you so good at like 11, 12, or 13, whatever? And he said, well, because he does it. I went, well,
that's a good impression.
He said, I do fine in school, but I decided that I'm going to put all of my emphasis on learning guitar completely now, more than anyone else. So by the time I'm 18, no one can say a thing to me, and I'm going to be better. Right? Yeah,
that's so wise.
It's about
ridiculous.
Who gets there first.
It's amazing.
So get there first. You're watching a podcast. Obviously, you watch John Tuohy's podcast. You watch them in their completeness.
All of mine.
But when you're done, you take that inspiration and practice for the next 5 hours.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. That's really, really good advice. But if you had to go back and talk to yourself at 17, and you had to give yourself one thing, musical thing, where it's like, 17-year-old Steve, listen, this is what you need to do to make your musical career better, your guitar playing better, whatever.
There would have been two things, and I'm not joking. First one is don't do it. And what I mean by that is go into a field. I really wanted to go into physical therapy. So, I was doing all that where I was at Sacred Heart for a hot second in a GPT program. I would say I really would have told myself to stick that route. And so I left there in order to go back.
Oh, interesting.
I went in, out, and back in. 17, I would just say, just don't do it. Because some of the best musicians that I know of didn't go to music school. Man. They played what they loved and what resonated with them. And that's what grew. And then eventually the audience came with it. And so going to music school and becoming a professional, that killed it for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who I was as an artist. Early on in my career, I had people like, I say prominent people, but people with money and people that could have made things happen for me, saying, hey, I want to manage you. Let's record an album in our studio, like legit studio, blah, blah, blah. And I would look at the contract and I would ask myself, is it worth the trade-off for what they're asking for with the fact that I don't know who I am as an artist? I have nothing to say. It's not time for me yet. Ironically, now at 43, I have something more to say. But the point is, I think I would have said, don't go to music school. Go into something that's lucrative enough that you really enjoy, that's useful, that will still eventually allow you free time to do what only resonates with you. And not take the $100 gig in Bangor, Maine, or the $50 jazz gig because you're pressured to do so. So that's the first piece of advice I'd give myself. But if it was just all musical, I would just say, I guess along the same lines, don't go to music school, transcribe. Do that every day, and then record yourself and see the little bits that you'd be surprised. I mean, you would. Anybody listening would be surprised. You think you're really great. Oh man, I played such a great gig tonight. And sometimes you listen back to audience tapes, you're like, oh, that's not what I thought, because I felt a certain way. So you got to record yourself and transcribe. And that's the best thing you can do for yourself musically. Actually, I got a question for you. In terms of transcription, are you a proponent of learning full solos or just little bits, like lot
bits? I have done full solo, especially in college, and then after that for a while, I would do full solos. Especially if I really, sometimes you have to in school, like you have to play this whole transcription. But if I really wanted to dig into the real nitty gritty, but I don't actually have a great memory in that way. Like it takes a lot of reps for me, like to like learn a 2-minute Chick Corea solo or whatever. It would take me forever. And I would go through and God, you know, and it'd be worth it, but give me a week of not playing it. Most of it's gone. I have to, what was that? So it actually was not practical for me in a way. I'm much better at taking bits that I like and then learning from the bit as opposed to just learning the part and then playing it all 12 keys. I mean, that's good, but it's like, oh, you know what this is? This is part of the diminished scale. Oh, okay. Oh, so here, let me see if I can do this on my own. Okay. And then now that concept will stay, whereas the actual lick will probably fall away at some point.
Expand upon that a little bit. But before I do, is there a way for you to post links? Because you and I did a video actually with Brett Sandler and Tim Bojanowski a couple of years ago. We did Spain by Chick Corea.
Yeah.
I did my solo.
Yeah,
the first half was a transcribed Chick Corea solo, which was weird, man, laying on guitar.
Right.
But so it took some different techniques.
Very hard.
But,
very hard.
Yeah, it was a cool one.
I'll put that in the show notes.
It's still online. I'm posting like little
I'm sure it
snippets
is, right?
of things here and there.
No.
But so in terms of like
we'll find it.
In terms of the transcriptions, I took a lesson with Tim Palmieri a couple of years ago, and I mean, now he's a monster, of course. And I'm just really happy. I got to play a couple of gigs with him, and I know that I was outclassed, and he was just kind of doing it because, to help me out or whatever. But
I mean, Tim is amazing. For anybody who doesn't know, Tim Palmieri is a guitar player of The Breakfast. He's Kung Fu, and now Lotus.
I just kind of wanted to be next to him to see, like, in the moment, what he was doing. Because I remember we played a wedding years ago, and he was one of the guests, and hey, why don't you come up and play a tune? And on my rig, it sounded like a completely different. I need to get up close and see what's going on. And like, when I played like one or two gigs, I was like, I mean, I can play. I'm hanging. But then there's a moment where he kicks it into a different gear, and you're like, oh, okay. I don't even know what that is. Just the facility. So I took a lesson with him years ago, and it was actually, come to find out, much like something that Mike Stern had done when Jocko told him, hey, man, that was lame when he couldn't hang with changes on the Miles stuff. And so what Tim told me to do was the same thing that Mike Stern did, which was find your tempo and basically like a stream of consciousness, play through changes, being very cognizant of the rhythm that you're playing, but just let it flow and don't stop. And what I do is I do that, and you'd be surprised where that can get you. So that's sort of like the baseline. Here's where I am when I improvise, but then you take those licks. So then instead of doing a full solo, extracting like a lick in a context, well then while you're doing that exercise, I'll take like a pet lick. Like today, I'm going to try to embed this in here. And so what that's going to train you to do is in the midst of a real situation of playing, your brain is in that situation of I'm improvising. You find out how you organically approach and exit that lick. And at first it's like a round peg, the game that the kids play. And but eventually you're like, okay, so this is part of my language now. And I found that is the best way that I've incorporated new licks. Well, I'll call it the Mike Stern exercise, stream of consciousness. And then embedding it and seeing, how does that work for me? And like you said, eventually those licks end up changing as you need them to change. You're like, okay, well, this is more natural for me. This is what I'm actually doing. Turns out I like this better. But yeah. So I agree. Yeah, snippets.
Oh, that's good. That's cool. And thank you also for being so candid about your different possible career trajectories
it's reality.
That you would have.
It's reality.
You would have, Well, yeah, it is, but it's also, I think, it's hard for. Okay, so I'll put it this way. I know how many? I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 guys who are very good musicians, but they knew that they were going to have a professional job as the income. And then more than just a hobby, it was like fun plus one, hobby plus. They're very serious about it. But they decided, like you said, I'm going to gig on the weekend. I'm going to whatever, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play during the week. I have my professional job and I go off and play on the weekends. And many of them seem pretty happy. The ones that I know, but here's my but, with the exception of one person I'm thinking of, their skills are almost across the board not as good as someone who decided to go for it, regardless of whether they stick. There is a cap, I think, for most people, with the exception of one person that I personally know, but I'm sure there's more. But
they don't have,
so that's a trade-off you have to be willing to make.
Like, okay,
also.
So if I go into a new situation, I have to be better than anybody else that came before, because I want them. Listen, you get into these things because somebody had to sub out one day and somebody knew your name and dropped it. And so I've gotten into situations where, like, when you show up, I'll rap. I don't care. I'll put the guitar down and rap and be a front man. And it's like, oh, you do that too? Yeah. Oh, wow. You can play on changes and play My Own Worst Enemy, like, authentically. Yeah. You can sing, and you can sing tenor notes sometimes, depending on the context. Yeah. Oh, you do backing vocals, and like, well, because that's a whole thing. People say they do backing vocals, and they don't really. They sing notes, and it's not right. Yeah, I know how to blend because I have a chorus background, like a legit chorus background. And I did musical theater. So, yeah, yes. And I want to be able for them to think, like, you know what? So-and-so is sick. I know exactly who to call. And eventually so-and-so decides, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. You're the guy. And so I have always had that pressure of being the best I can be and trying to be, I hate to say it, better than the next guy. Mm-hmm. But I love playing with great musicians, right? And so if the band that I'm playing with, yeah, they're a professional wedding band, say, but they're the best musicians you'll ever. And yeah, I'm getting paid, but shoot, man, those times when, like, the band almost stops because someone, okay, Scott Packham, Scott, okay. There have been at least 3 occasions where he's done something so nutty on stage that everyone on stage just cracks up and almost stops playing because it's unbelievable. And we've listened to a lot of music, man. I know what unbelievable is. It's like world-class unbelievable. There's nothing better than getting a front row seat to that. And then, like, there's an emotional forward momentum that you get as a player from, like, now I want to play too. And not because I want to show you up. I'm just inspired.
Yeah.
And dude, I don't know if you've been in a situation like, we play with some of the same groups too. And some gigs are better than others. And, like, we're here for the paycheck tonight, and it's still cool. It's whatever. And I'm just playing. It's whatever. But, your skills, I don't know what this is, man. All of a sudden you, like, unlock new skills that you didn't know were there when the right people are playing. I'm like, whoa, how come I couldn't play like this last week? Right. Because the right people weren't around.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that strange X factor that happens? And it's like, it's very spiritual, for lack of another word. It's something,
momentum where, like, you get chills and, like, you stop being.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need that in my life, at least. If I can get that once a quarter, like that, I'm like, I've had a great year, because it's just, it's soul fulfilling.
Man, I've had so many of those moments this year. Like, yeah, ridiculous cats.
That's amazing.
That I've been really, really blessed to play with. And it's those things where, like, I'm a side guy, so, like, maybe they don't call me for 6 months or even a year. Maybe I'll get called back. I don't know how these things work, because budgets too. There's some bands that they only have a certain budget for certain people, and certain instrumentation is more important than others. So I think you can get by. There's some bands that do like, if you're pressed, you might be a band that says, okay, we're going to do bass, drums, guitar, and someone's going to sing. There are other bands that say, okay, well, we don't need guitar. What we need is bass, drums, keys, or maybe drums,
keys,
left hand, bass, keys. You know what I mean? So it depends on your flavor that you want, and it's all great. So I got really lucky this past year.
There's like some of these non-negotiables that go beyond the obviously, it's a good paycheck, it's a good work day, whatever. You're hanging with cool people. When those kind of intangibles happen, man, like it's a different. You're like, oh yeah, this is why. You almost get to
forget all
reminded. It's
forget all about
right, man.
That I said yes.
It's amazing.
Maybe said yes originally for money. So do what resonates with you. Do what resonates for you, in you.
It's good.
And get your stuff together before anybody else, as completely as anybody else, so that when you get to the gig and they cut time in front of you to read, you're not sitting there sweating. You can just like gracefully do it and have enough energy left over to be somebody cool to be around. Like, I don't want this cat over here, man. He's like so uptight. What's his deal? And then they think you have. Yeah,
that's because I'm anxious about playing the shit.
So,
yeah.
What? Yeah, that's the advice I would give my 17.
That's awesome, man. It's good. All that stuff is really good advice. So now I really think this is going to be for the. I told the audience in the beginning that this is going to have some guitar stuff for those guitar heads. And one of the main things, and I've talked about this on a couple other ones, but everyone sort of has their own view on it, is the technology now for guitar players specifically. I mean, it's kind of across the board, but for guitar players specifically, there's a lot of people who have, let's say, very strong opinions on every side.
Internet, there's very strong opinions.
So, and if you, yes. And I find that guitar players tend to fall into a couple different main categories. And I want to talk about your approach to guitar technology. We're talking mostly in this place. We'll talk about modeling. We can talk about IR captures. We can talk about tone X. We can talk about any of the things that are, let's call it not just amp plus a couple pedals plus a cab, because I think we've all done that at some point.
You remember the time
or still also do
when
that.
We played Stella Blues and I showed up with, I had my my combo at a master volume or non-master volume. Was it a Blues Deluxe reissue? Great. You got to change the speakers out on those though, by the way. But so I had that plus we'll call it a hot plate. It was a Rivera Rock Crusher. And then I had a stereo PA that was just for me. So what I was doing was, and I got this I saw Jimmy Herring do an interview, and this was on the heels of listening to Sean Lane's rig, where Sean Lane said, well, I wanted to create my own ambience. Like the wet, dry, wet rigs. And Jimmy Herring was like, yeah, so what I do is I just have a hot plate and I run a line out into my Axe effects. So I have the dry amp and then I can blend in the effects, and he had 2 cabinets and that whole thing. And I showed up to Stella Blues, which is a small stage. And I had all this stuff that just wouldn't fit. And you guys were like, Steve, man, I know it's your, but you can't. I was like, damn it, I can't. But I tried. So, I mean, it's always been I don't want to say an issue. It's not a matter of gas. I just want to have a nice sound. I want the right amount of ambience. I want the right amount of gain structure. I want the amp my sound to react a certain way. And I need a few basic pet sounds. And that was years ago. What I was doing then was I had the 11. That's what I was doing. I had a fader, and I was running out to the 11 rack using stereo effects from that, and it was just way too much. But now, the stuff that we have now, we can essentially do everything that we need in like this Tone X pedal that I bought. It was $175. and it's the smallest form factor ever. I had enough to buy a second one, right? It's the 175. And I can have an entire rig that I made myself, and three buttons that serially click through. So I have a 3-channel in, and I can just go direct. So I love where we're at as musicians right now. And just by the way, Pro Go Tones is going to be the website that me and my buddy Tyler are putting up in a couple weeks, and we're doing some extensive captures for Tone X and Quad Cortex. So the lay of the land right now is we have modeling, we have captures or profiles if you're in Kemper, and then you have your standard just rigs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done all three, and they all have their drawbacks and they all have their pluses and minuses. My A rig is an Axe FX 2 running into a power amp, and then a bare-faced audio 2x12. It's got a V30 and a G12H75. And I got that because the older groups, I like the digital stuff. The older groups, they don't understand what going direct means. And a lot of them, they can't hear very well. And I've complained about this too in the past. I've texted you like, bro, I cannot believe this. If you don't show up with a discernibly large cabinet with brand name on it, they will say, I can't hear you. Where's your amp? And you can tell them all you want. It's plugged into your mixer, and you have me turned up, and you even have me in your in-ears, and you have full control.
Yeah. And
they look to the side and they only see you, and they'll go, where's your amp? I can't hear you. So there's if you're playing with older folks, you got to bring a discernibly large rig, or else they can't hear you. They can't hear you anyway, but they'll be able to see you, and they think they can. So that's
it's a little psychological,
I mean, if you
really.
Play for Alice Cooper, you kind of have to show
up.
Not that he can't hear, but you kind of have to show up with Martian sticks.
Yeah, well, and also, but if you think about it, okay, so I've been playing Fractal, for instance, for God.
You had the first.
For a long time, I had like 15 years. Yeah, I had the first generation stuff because I was like, this is a great idea, and my friend Alex Faulkner had the first one I ever saw, and I was like, this sounds great. Okay, I got it. I should jump on this. So between then and now, it's very different. People are getting much, much more comfortable with you showing up and saying, oh yeah, I'll plug direct. I have a thing. It has changed, but there was a lot of resistance for a long time. And sure, there's still a bunch of people who do sort of resist on either psychological or like aesthetic
so if my
grounds or whatever.
Band leader was a little older, I got to show up with a big cabinet. That's just the way it's got to be. But you like you said, it's more people understand what it is now. They know that it's going to sound like a guitar. They know what's up. And frankly, I'm a proponent of using in-ears.
Yep.
So I like a clean stage with no, little to no stage volume and ears. It's the best experience for the engineer, which translates into a better experience for the vocalists who don't oversing. They can hear their pitch better. And you can hear the keyboard player on the other side of the stage 25 feet away. And it actually translates into a better experience for the audience. And you might not feel that way at first. Like there's a lot of people, I hate your stuff. I hate it. No, it sucks. It sucks. No, it doesn't. It's actually better. It's your perception. Like you said, psychological. It's your perception of it. You can put on a better show with an in-ear mix, and clean stage. But yeah, with the modeling at least, you have the ability to tweak until your heart's content for your guitar. And that's important. That's important because I just did a bunch of DIs with like 7 different guitars and pickups. And I was shocked as to how different they sound. Like the Lala Imperials sound completely different than the PRS 5815 LTs. And it's like the American Strat sounds completely different. They have their own thing. The burst buckers sound different. You know what I mean? And so modeling, you can set your own rig exactly as you want it. But you're spending endless time tweaking. And then it's psychologically, you almost want to tweak instead of play. That's what I was doing. I had these elaborate rigs with Axe effects.
Yes.
And then I started doing wet, dry, wet stuff again. And I'm like, no, I've been down this road. I need to play. And I don't want to go back to using an amp because of the drawbacks of that too. Because just, for guitar players out there, I like the non-master volume amps, the way they sound. But in terms of space, if you're getting stuff out of the power section and the reverb and delays come before the power section, you're also distorting all of that ambience. And I want to clean ambience. So, so I was like, well, let me see what else is out there. Let me look at Kemper. But then I found out about Tonix, and Tonix actually sounds way more accurate. And so I bought this tiny little pedal, and I'm like, well, all of the capture creators out there, I bought some of their packs, and it's like, these don't sound good. They don't sit well in a mix for a couple of reasons, because the creators, it's like the Wild West out there. Anyone can make a slick video and say, oh, I made it. I've got this really great amp. I've done this. Oh, I believe you. I trust you. And they can make it sound really good for YouTube. But when you actually get it out on a gig in the real world, especially with your guitar, which maybe they use like EMG 81s and I'm playing, like I said, like Birchbucker ones, it's going to be a different, you're pumping in different sonics into that capture, into that amp, and it's not going to sound good. So half the time, these paid captures, they don't sit well in a mix live. They're not making them on flat response systems. They're not checking them on different PA systems. They're not bringing them out road tested with different groups in the real world. Maybe they don't know what a guitar is supposed to sound like in a mix. And they're only doing it with one guitar. So I was like, well, I'm going to take one amp. Right now I'm working on a Mesa Mini. I'm going to take one amp. I'm going to take 7 guitars plus DIs. I'm going to make full packs of what I need, different gain stages and treatments for each one, just for each one. I start completely new for each guitar. And so basically the idea is if you go to the Progo Tones website, you choose your amp, then you choose the guitar type and pickup that most closely is like your main guitar, and you're pretty much there. I mean, because that's the guitar pickup that I essentially used that you're using for those captures, plus the DIs, which if you're not into this world, that just means the amp head without the cabinet and the mic. We've been miking these up with all sorts of, obviously the 57s, but there's a Soyuz. Have you heard of the Soyuz 1973? It's phenomenal.
Yeah, tell me about that. Isn't that the one that you can change the way it captures?
No, it's just
is that the one that's like
it's
a digital
from
microphone
Russia.
or
It's some
am I
Russian
thinking of a
company.
different
I heard about it through Pete Thorne's website videos. Just a phenomenal condenser mic. There's the Shure 313.
Okay.
There's 414. So all the standard mics that you would use, and like some really great cabinets that we've been using. And I have like just endless IRs on the message boards. What are you guys using? And then like the ones that pop up the most, I'll check my DIs against all of them and then make sure the amp DIs are a good cross section to work with any of them. So it's going to be like the most extensive. It's my first one. It's going to be like the most extensive capture pack for Tonix on the market. Yeah. So hopefully I can get
That's awesome.
Well, that's the thing.
And gig tested, which is really important in different rooms, right? Because that's the thing. You don't know a lot of these people. So some of them may go out and but most likely they're capturing it in a very neutral studio, which is good. But then when you go live, it's good in theory. It's not good when you actually go to
space
apply
on their speaker, and you don't know what's hyped. You don't know what notes you have. Maybe there's a room note of 150, and now you didn't compensate, and it doesn't sound good on anything but your room, right? So we've checked them on JBLs, EVs, the QSCs, which are pretty standard. Then, through different boards and different bands and different lineups, does this work? And basically, if I don't have to think about my sound and it just does what it's supposed to do so that I can just play music. I'm like, oh, I'm not even thinking about it needs more or less of this. It's too much low end. A lot of guitar players, they play by themselves. They play to YouTube backing tracks, and they always have way too much information below 100 hertz. They always have way too much information above, like 5 or 6K. And the other thing people never realize is the Fletcher-Munson curve. When you turn up live, your ear can hear or perceives low frequencies and high frequencies easier. So at lower volumes, you actually need a more mid-focus sound. So all the stuff that I'm making is basically for live musicians to say, like, listen, I'm done tweaking. I want to play. I got a gig. I want to play. These work. If I turn up with a live band, they just work.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
It's really cool, man, because we live in a day and age where, like, you can go out and say, like, okay, well, what am I going to use tonight? Tonight, I think I'm going to use my Fender Deluxe rig. And it's just digital. And it's a real Fender Deluxe. You know what I mean? I want to use my Marshall 800 tonight. That rig. Another question for you. Do you use the same...
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, you do now. You use an amazing PT 100, is it? Or 50? 15. Well, when you were doing
15.
all digital, were you using the same for like the whole gig? Or mock?
Nope, I never did. See, okay, so there's two stages of this. One is I get really, the more options I have, like even in the acts, like, 200 amps and how many it actually physically makes me anxious a lot of times, because you're not, like you said, you're gonna like, oh, well, I could probably improve this a little bit. There's something a little bit weird in the low end. Maybe I could, and like that actually makes me like anxious. So I had to kind of draw a line at some point and go, all right, so I don't want to go deep edit anything. I want to have a really good, for whatever the gig happens to be, I want to pick my 2 or 3 bass sounds, and then I'll go from there. So for covers and weddings and functions and stuff like that, I tend to have a clean amp, a dirty amp, and a sustainy Mesa thing for over the top solos that, and then within there, and they're actually all different amplifiers, but I use the same speaker emulation on each one of them, which is the thing I've realized actually imparts the most. That's when I go,
it's the end filter of
the
whole thing.
I used a different, I didn't pick the end, right? Yeah, but exactly. And so that to me is the most important part. I can kind of, you won't even tell, like my this is going to sound like, this is a little tangent, but you remember Cliffs of Dover, right? Okay, yeah. Who doesn't, right? Okay, well, he's using an entirely different guitar when he kicks on the guitar solo. I had no idea until recently that's what it was. He goes, oh, yeah, it just sounds like I stepped on a fuzz face, but I actually was playing a 335 or a Les Paul. Yeah, one of those. Like, I think I actually met it with 335. And I'm like, you are? Well, he's using it through his same rig. He switched guitars, and I'm like, oh, that's why it sounds like you just stepped on a pedal. I couldn't tell. Now that I listen to it, I'm like, oh yeah, that does sound different. But that could be achieved by, stacking some pedals or doing some other things that Eric Johnson would do. But that sort of was a light bulb for me. And I'm like, oh, it's really it's the whatever's on the back end, that's going to have the biggest, especially if you're dealing with gain, that's going to deliver the biggest bang for your buck there. And then the front end is going to be tailored to taste. There's going to be the 10 to 20% that you're going to need to account for. But if you have a setting that you like, just make sure there's not too much high end. Make sure there's not too much low end. It's not actually that, doesn't have to be that deep if you understand the principles of some of them.
I really, at this point, what I really want to do is I want to be able to be me. Finally. Okay, so with those three head sounds, because I used to go nuts. If we were playing Def Leppard, I would have a completely different, pour some sugar on me rig. And if every song you're changing and the whole rig is changing and the sound is changing, the audience doesn't have time to catch up because or
the sound.
But
guys.
You'd be surprised as to what your ear will acclimate to in a span of like 5 minutes. Because, dude, I should have known. Because I had the worst acoustic guitar ever. It was like $100. And I had it for years, and I would play gigs. And the first 2 songs, I remember it was such poor sound, but I didn't have any money. I would just sit there like, okay, I'm going to struggle through this. But by song 3, me and the audience have become acclimated to this. And now I can actually perform. I can actually perform it. And it actually becomes okay. So I want some sounds that I can be comfortable with the least amount of like time on stage. So if as soon as the engineer or the band leader whoever puts me up in the monitors, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I don't have to like comfortable. What's this? And it blends well with the band. But now, and I think I achieved some of that, but now I want something that allows me to speak. So what's my language? Like when you think of like Massini, he's got a language. And so he's got a sound that allows for that language. I mean, he's got a couple sounds, but could you imagine Matheniisms on a tinny sounding Strat that you would play like My Girl?
I mean, that would be an incredible YouTube video that I would love to see, or Instagram.
Let's the worst.
But no,
possible,
I know what you're saying.
Sounds that you can get, but it's not the right sound, you know. So I'm trying to figure out like, well, who am I as a player? When I actually play, what am I trying to do? And then what's the sound that's really enabling that to happen in the most joyful way, where I don't have to go, oh, brother, what's that? You know, like, I play. Yeah. I hate that feeling. I can play it, and it's just like, yeah, that's the thing.
Well, I've realized one stupid thing for me, which I can't believe it's taken me so long to figure out, is that because I'm tall, sound hits me in the back, or the butt, or the legs, and it doesn't hit me in the ear. And
you probably have a brighter sound experience than you thought.
If it does. I did, and I realized that I was like, oh man, and I have to have a big stage where I can stand downstage from it so that it's actually coming up to a proper level. Then I'm much more comfortable. If it's not, I'm like, I always have to turn myself up louder, and I'm a little bit too bright, and I'm like, oh, I'll go out and I'll with a wireless, and I'll be like, I mean, that's too bright though. Like, and I'll go down, turn it, and then I can't hear myself on stage, and it's like this whole battle, and I prefer to not fight that battle as much anymore, which is when in-ears does definitely come into help.
I'd recommend, I know PRS, they have good cams, but I would recommend the barefaced stuff because, because,
a lot of people love them.
I guess they call it a proprietary baffle design in the back. It really, no matter where you walk, you can hear it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It sounds more like, the cab I got is a little brighter because I got 16 ohm speakers in it, which, whatever. But I mean, it emanates the sound all around, and I'd recommend looking into it. But you guys are all in ears at this point, anyway.
Yeah, for MMZ, it's sort of a moot point. But for other stuff, it's not because I'll use my modeling, or I don't really bring out the Sir too much because it's like just a lot, and I have a pedal board with a bunch of
it's so nice. I have it over there, but my pedal board that I have now, it's I can show up with a guitar, little bag. It's like the the pedal train, like New York City model. If you've ever done a load in it like the Omni in Boston in the middle of the winter, or you end up, winter gigs especially, Christmas gig, you walking city blocks in New York City. I had a cart once. I'm like, hell, city blocks in New York with a cart. Never again. Yeah. Never. I show up, guitar, pedal board.
Yep.
You got a PA. That's not, hey, I don't get paid to provide a PA system. Plug in. That's all you need. So great. But
Yep. It's a beautiful thing. A lot of my New York City friends, guitar players, they literally are like, listen, I'm going to bring a couple things. And if it sounds terrible, oh, well, I'm still playing the game. Like, I mean, they get to the point, you know, 'cause they start off, they're like, oh man, this is going to be great. And they start off with their big rigs, and then they have that experience like you're talking about. And they go, well, maybe I'll just, you know, okay, a smaller cab.
Nope.
And then, maybe I need it. And it just, and then they're ending up using, you know, whatever house amp that sucks. But you're like, hey, listen, it is what it is. And I'm going to, you know, but that's one of the beautiful things about modeling and that world now, the digital world, is that you can, you know, pretty much through anything you can get, if you know what you're halfway know what you're doing, you can get some decent sounds even on equipment that's not great, PAs that aren't great.
You know, plug in and have the sound engineer not have to touch it. Like, you really don't have to high pass it. I already did it.
Yes.
You don't have to take out the whatever is ringing at 2K or 2.5 because I already did it. You know, there's no honkiness in the mid because guess what? Did it. And it's not perfect for the room, but it's 95% there.
Right. And then you can just loosen the chains and go, okay, all right, I'm going to play this gig. I'm going to have fun now. This is what I'm here for. You know. Oh man, this has been an awesome conversation, Steve. I've really appreciated it. I want to be cognizant of your time. Where can people find you? Where should they look for you? And of course, I'll put it all in the show notes once you send me an email.
You can find me at basically Instagram. The handle is PDA Hardy OMG. Absolutely important.
The OMG is important.
Although
that part. This is where we send memes back and forth. To
all
each
I
other.
do, man. Memes, meme generator website, and although PDA is a defunct band, I still use that as my brand on Instagram. Soon enough, you can go to ProGo Tones. It should be progotones.com, but you know, I'll get it to you. Hopefully, it can be updated. The links, and finally, my own original music. It's on all streaming platforms. It's Jackson, Jaxton, Gold, and the definitions. So Jackson Gold and the definitions. This is I don't do this when I say it, but you know, it's hard to. What was that?
Might as well.
Jameson Jackson Gold and the definition.
Jackson.
Gold. And there's a lot to dig into there
man.
too. So.
Well, everyone listening to this, go check out Steve and all his projects, and definitely send him a guitar meme on Instagram. That's what I tend to do. So hey, thank you so much,
I'm about
man.
to
I really
hit the
appreciate
jam,
it.
blasting some MMZ. What do you recommend
nice.
to really like?
Thanks, man.
Get me like aggravated and like I want to.
Oh, aggravated. Oh man, that's a tough one.
Aerial.
How about Terrell Aerial? That's pretty aggravating. That's a good one. That's from the self-titled record. If you want something from the new record,
Heavy Days,
Heavy Days.
That sounds appropriate.
Will be from the new record. Yeah,
it's rock. So,
all right, man. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen.
All right. Talk to you soon.